It is 2 o'clock in the morning, September 2nd, 1866. You are asleep above your shop on Pudding Lane when your neighbor hammers on the door. You smell it before you see it. Wood smoke, pitch, and something sweeter underneath. The King's Baker's oven's gone wrong 3 doors down. You have seen house fires before. Everyone in London has. You go back to bed. By the end of this video, you will know what it was actually like to live through the 4 days that burned the greatest city in England to the ground. To understand why London burned, you have to walk its streets the night before. The city inside the old Roman walls held around 350,000 people, packed into timber houses that leaned so far over the lanes that neighbors on upper floors could shake hands across the street. Buildings were framed in oak, sealed with tar, roofed in thatch. Warehouses along the Thames held hemp, oil, brandy, coal, and gunpowder left over from the war with the Dutch. It had not rained properly in 10 months. The summer of 1666 had baked the whole city into kindling, and the wind that night came hard out of the east. And against all of that, London's entire defense was a bucket. There was no fire brigade in 1666. Each parish church kept leather buckets, long iron hooks for pulling down burning thatch, and brass hand squirts that held about a quart of water. 3 men to work one. Good for a chimney fire and useless for a street. The real water supply was the waterworks under London Bridge. Great wheels turned by the Thames that pumped river water into hollow elm pipes running beneath the streets. The flames reached the bridge in the first hours and burned the wheels. After that, the pipes were dry. Desperate householders dug down and bored the wooden mains open anyway, and what little pressure remained bled out into the mud. The city had lost its water in the first morning, and it had 3 more days of fire to go. The blaze had started at the shop of Thomas Farriner, the King's own baker, who supplied ship's biscuit to the Navy. His family woke to smoke on the stairs and climbed out through an upstairs window along the gutters to the house next door. Their maid was too frightened to follow. She stayed and became the fire's first death. By dawn on Sunday, the fire had taken 300 houses and was moving along the riverfront, where the warehouses fed it like a furnace. The Lord Mayor, Thomas Bloodworth, was woken and brought to look at it. He shrugged it off with a crude joke and went back to bed. That single dismissal cost the city its best hours. The one proven way to stop a fire this size was to pull down the houses in its path and starve it of fuel. But demolition needed the mayor's order, and Bloodworth, afraid of the rebuilding costs, refused. It took Samuel Pepys, a Navy clerk who had climbed the Tower of London that morning and seen the whole riverfront alight, carrying the news upriver to Whitehall in person, before King Charles II sent back a direct command: spare no houses. By then the fire was making its own wind. For the people in its path, the fire moved at the speed of rumor. You would hear it before you saw it, a sound survivors described as 1,000 iron carts on cobblestones. And then the sky above your street would go orange, and it was time to run. The lanes filled with carts, and the price of hiring one went from a few shillings to as much as £40, close to 2 years' wages for a laborer, paid by desperate merchants to move their goods. People buried what they could not carry. The diarist Samuel Pepys dug a pit in his garden and put in his wine and his Parmesan cheese. Thousands waded into the Thames itself, pushing their belongings ahead of them on anything that floated. By Monday, the fire was a single front over half a mile wide, and by Tuesday, it did the thing no one believed possible. It took St. Paul's Cathedral. The great church had stood over London for 600 years, and the printers and booksellers of Paternoster Row had carried their entire stock into St. Faith's, the parish chapel in the cathedral's crypt, certain that no fire could cross that much stone. Then the lead roof, 6 acres of it, melted and ran down Ludgate Hill in a glowing stream. The stones themselves exploded in the heat like grenades. The floor above the crypt gave way, the burning roof came down into the books, and the nation's book trade burned below ground for a week. Witnesses wrote that the fire at its peak generated temperatures around 1,250 degrees Celsius. Hot enough that melted pottery from that week is still dug out of London basements today. The fire died on Wednesday, September 5th, when the east wind finally dropped, and the king's men, led by his brother the Duke of York, blew fire breaks with gunpowder ahead of the flames. What it left behind is hard to hold in the mind. In 4 days, the fire had destroyed 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, and 436 acres, more than 4/5 of the walled city. Around 100,000 people, 1 Londoner and 3 were homeless, camped in fields at Moorfields and Islington, in shanties built from salvage. The official death toll was recorded as just 6, a number almost no historian believes, since the fire burned hot enough to leave nothing of the poor and the old who could not run. While the city burned, the ordinary business of staying alive got strange and expensive. Bread doubled in price within 2 days because the bakeries were either burning or buried in refugees. The camps in the fields outside the walls held more people than most English cities, and the king rode out among them in person, promising food, and ordered the Navy's biscuit stores opened to feed them. Fear ran faster than the flames. London was at war with the Dutch and the French that summer, and the rumor took hold that the fire was no accident, but an enemy plot. Mobs pulled foreigners from their lodgings and beat them in the streets. One Frenchman was attacked for carrying what the crowd swore were fireballs, which turned out to be tennis balls. At the Tower of London, where the Crown kept hundreds of barrels of gunpowder, the garrison watched the fire crawl toward the walls and began hauling the barrels to the river, knowing that if the flames arrived first, the explosion would level everything the fire had missed. The city also needed someone to blame, and it found him. A French watchmaker named Robert Hubert confessed to starting the fire. Though his story changed with every telling, he first claimed to have started it in Westminster, which never burned, and witnesses swore his ship had not even landed until 2 days after the fire began. It did not matter. He was tried, convicted on his own confused confession, and hanged at Tyburn that October, and the crowd tore at his body afterward. Years later, Parliament's own inquiry concluded what the baker's family never admitted, and everyone quietly knew. The fire was an accident, born of an unraked oven, a dry summer, and a wind. And here is the strangest turn. Out of it came a better city. Within days, men like Christopher Wren laid rebuilding plans before the king. The new London rose in brick and stone, its streets widened, its trades regulated by the Rebuilding Act of 1667, which flatly banned timber fronts and thatch inside the walls. Parliament also solved a problem no one thinks about. Who pays? A special fire court was set up with power to settle any dispute between landlord and tenant in days rather than years, so that rebuilding could start at once, instead of waiting a generation for the lawyers. Its judges sat for nearly a decade and handled over 1,000 cases, and the city rose around their rulings. Wren spent the next 35 years raising a new St. Paul's, the dome that still stands today, and 51 new churches around it. The insurance industry as we know it was born in the ashes, when a man named Nicholas Barbin opened the first fire insurance office in 1681. The disaster even gets partial credit, though historians still argue for helping end the Great Plague that had killed 100,000 Londoners the year before, by burning out the worst of the old city slums. And on the spot where it all began, Wren and Robert Hooke raised the monument, a stone column 202 feet tall, standing exactly 202 feet from the site of Farriner's oven, so that the distance itself is the record of where London's worst night started. The Great Fire left London a rule it never forgot. A city is only as safe as its worst night, and its worst night always starts small. A dropped spark in a bakery, a mayor who went back to bed, a dry east wind. Everything after that was arithmetic, written in flame across 4 days, and London spent the next 350 years making sure the sum never came out that way again.